Good morning, and welcome to this press briefing on military and National Guard support to the 58th Presidential Inauguration. I'm Major Michael Odell, Public Affairs Officer for Joint Task Force, District of Columbia. I'd like to thank you all for being here today. First, please bear with me as I go over the ground rules for our press conference today. Following statements, our speakers will be available for approximately 20 minutes to answer your questions. I ask that, again, you please keep your questions within the subject matter area, which is military and National Guard support to the 58th Presidential Inauguration. Toward the end of our 20 minutes, I will indicate how much time we have for remaining questions. In order to ensure that as many of you as possible have the opportunity to ask questions, I kindly ask that you limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. However, if time does permit, I'll call on you again for additional questions. Since the number of media here, we all give you an opportunity to ask questions. Now, when the floor is open for questions, I ask that you please raise your hand, and I'll acknowledge you. Please wait until the microphone is there, as we are broadcasting this, and it's so that all of our cameras can get the audio. Please state your name and your affiliation for the record, and the individual in which you are directing your question to. Now, press kits were sent out electronically. However, if you did not receive a press kit, please let one of our staff know. We do have a limited number of press kits available for you. Following this press conference, the Joint Task Force, National Capital Region, and Joint Task Force, District of Columbia staff will be on hand to help you with any further needs, including addressing any additional questions or interviews with our subject matter experts. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's press conference. Our speakers today include Major General Bradley A. Becker, Commander, Joint Task Force, National Capital Region. Brigadier General George M. Degnan, Deputy Commander, Joint Task Force, National Capital Region. From the National Guard, Major General Errol R. Schwartz, Commanding General, District of Columbia, National Guard. Brigadier General William J. Walker, Commander, Joint Task Force, District of Columbia. Again, may I direct you to your press kits, where the correct spelling of your speakers' names and official titles are written down for your convenience. The Joint Task Force National Capital Region today will discuss and address questions related to the Joint Task Force National Capital Region's role in the inauguration ceremony and parade, the months of planning between military and civilian entities, the large-scale movement of assets and resources, and logistical considerations and military aspects for Inauguration Day 2017. The National Guard will discuss and address questions regarding the National Guard's support to civilian authorities, including supporting the U.S. Secret Service, the Capitol Police, the Metropolitan D.C. Police, and the D.C. Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, among others. Their responsibilities related to traffic control and crowd management activities in and around the inauguration, and logistical considerations and military staffing aspects for the more than 7,500 National Guard soldiers and airmen supporting the inauguration. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Major General Bradley Becker.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for attending today's rehearsal of concept drill. 36 days from today, the nation will witness our 58th presidential inauguration as we again celebrate the peaceful transfer of power and inaugurate our 45th Commander-in-Chief. Members of the armed forces have been involved in every presidential inauguration since April 30th, 1789, when soldiers and militia escorted President George Washington to Federal Hall in New York City. Military support for the inauguration is appropriate, traditional, and important in honoring our President and Commander-in-Chief, while it also recognizes our commitment to civilian control of the military. As always, we will showcase the excellence of our military forces while demonstrating our dedication to commitment and duty. As you can imagine, planning an event for hundreds of thousands of spectators in the nation's capital and millions more viewing around the world is a monumental undertaking. Accordingly, this Joint Task Force has spent many months preparing to ensure the entire inaugural period is a success. Through thoughtful and detailed planning, combined with many rehearsals such as you've seen this morning, our military personnel will ensure the approximately 5,000 service members comprising musical units, marching bands, color guards, salute batteries, and honor cordons will all render appropriate ceremonial honors to our new Commander-in-Chief. Along with orchestrating the ceremonial aspects of the inauguration, our Joint Task Force also provides substantial assistance to the Presidential Inauguration Committee, the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, and the United States Secret Service, as well as other federal, state, and local agencies to ensure a safe and secure environment on January 20th. It is truly a historic and exciting time for the Joint Task Force National Capital Region and for our entire nation. I am proud to lead this team and represent the millions of uniformed service members who are serving around the world. And I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Becker. From the D.C. National Guard, please welcome Major General Errol Schwartz.
Good morning. Let me add my welcome to the District of Columbia National Guard Armory, where our headquarters is located. The D.C. National Guard has been involved in presidential inaugurations since 1861, and we have done several of these activities here in the nation's capital. We are currently receiving support from over 40 states, so we will have just short of 8,000 guardsmen on the streets of Washington supporting our local authorities and our federal agencies. We look forward to having a peaceful transition of power on the 20th of January, just 36 days away, and we will continue to work with our state and interagency partners to make sure that we have a peaceful transition of power. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. The Deputy Commander for Joint Task Force National Capital Region, Brigadier General George Degnan.
Good morning. I'd also like to add my welcome to each of you. Thank you for joining us here today for our ceremonial rehearsal, and thank you to the D.C. National Guard for hosting today's event. As Deputy for Inaugural Support for the 58th Presidential Inauguration, it is a true privilege and honor to be a part of our American history. My primary role as Deputy Commander for Inaugural Support is to liaise with the Presidential Inaugural Committee, often referred to as the PIC, and the Joint Congressional Committee for Inaugural Ceremonies, or the JCIC. Together, we ensure the men and women of the Joint Task Force National Capital Region perform their many key roles, honoring our new Commander-in-Chief with precision and professionalism. Of course, we don't or can't do it alone. We're lockstep with multiple interagency partners, all who have been planning for many months to ensure the peaceful transition of power, which is a cornerstone of our democracy. As U.S. military members, we're gaining valuable experience through the partnerships created and planning we have conducted with other governmental agencies. We recognize that through our partnerships, we confidently move toward January 20th while serving the American public and continue to strengthen the trust that they have placed in us. I'd like to echo what Major General Becker said. We will strive to showcase our excellence and demonstrate our dedication and commitment to duty. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
And finally, remarks from Brigadier General William J. Walker, Joint Task Force, District of Columbia, Commander.
Thank you, Major Odle. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I am responsible for the 7,800 Guardsmen, Army and Air, that will be coming from 40 different states. We look forward to this event every 4 years. For many of us, this will be my 6th inauguration with the District of Columbia National Guard. I had the privilege of being the Deputy Joint Task Force Commander for District of Columbia National Guard in 2013, and I was an operations officer in 2009 and in 2005. So they're coming from 40 different states, and for many of these Guardsmen, Army and Air, it's a major event that they look forward to. it's a tremendous recruiting tool for us and a retention tool to come and be part of an historic event such as this every 4 years. Just a bit of trivia, we just had a guardsman who was here for President Carter, and because of we can only stay in the military for so long, he wasn't able to stay for this one. But can you imagine from President Carter to right now? So we have that kind of experience with supporting our district and federal government partners. As General Becker mentioned, from the Secret Service, the U.S. Capitol Police, the Park Police, the Department of Homeland and Emergency Management Security, and as General Schwartz mentioned, we've been doing this since 1861. I am honored to have this command, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you again for coming.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, General Walker. Again, for questions, I ask that you please raise your hand until I acknowledge you and wait for the microphone before you ask your question. If you would please stand and state your name and your affiliation for the record, and again, who your question is directed to. Again, because of the large turnout and in order to ensure that as many of you as possible have the opportunity to ask questions, I ask again to please limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. I will now take the first question. Yes, ma'am, in the front row to the right. Nope, right here.
Hi, I'm Nancy Bennick from the AP. I think this question is best for Brigadier General Degnan, but if anyone else wants to jump in, that's fine. The walkthrough on the map was predicated on what would be a typical day, inauguration day for a president-elect. In your conversations with PIC, have you been given any assurances or indications that President-elect Trump wants the typical inauguration day? He wasn't a typical candidate. Is it possible he might want to do things differently than in the past? Or have you been given indications that he wants to follow the usual template?
The planning that we've been doing for the inauguration started many months ago. In a sense, we were apolitical in that we had a plan for the inauguration regardless of who was elected. So the map drill, the MapX rehearsal of concept that we're doing today is all based on historical precedents, if you will. And again, a lot of this has to take many months to coordinate with all the different agencies. We're still negotiating with the Presidential Inaugural Committee as far as the specifics for the parade, but you know, with the city laid out the way it is, the number of people that we're bringing into the city, there's, you know, only so many ways you can make this thing happen. So we're still waiting on the final details, such as the number of balls specifically. But generally speaking, the inauguration is taking shape as it has in the past, although subject to change, as you know.
Great. Thank you very much. And, sir, your question?
Todd Lopez, Army News Service. This would be for General Becker. How many military uniformed personnel involved overall? I heard 8,000 guardsmen from 40 states. Are there even more guardsmen as well? Are there active duty? How many total personnel under you, sir? Great.
I will address the what we refer to as the Title 10, the active duty service members that fall under my command as the Joint Task Force NCR commander. So we'll have a little over 5,000 that support ceremonially. That includes everything from the parade to supporting inaugural balls to support for the JSIC at the swearing-in ceremony, the logistical support to make all these movements and get the parade folks from their staging area to where they're going to set up for the parade itself. We've got another about 2,000 that are in support of our of the U.S. Secret Service, U.S. Capitol Police, to support from a security role, not a law enforcement role. So if you look at the Title 10 side under the Joint Task Force National Capital Region, it's about 7,000 total, 5,000 that will be out at the site itself supporting ceremonially. On the Guard side, and I don't want to get the numbers, but I think they briefed, it's about 8,000, just under 8,000, that will be under a Title 32 status. So when you add all this up together, you're looking at about 13,000 actually out at the site, and then a couple thousand more from my Joint Task Force supporting from behind the scenes.
In addition to the numbers which were briefed, we are coordinating with the Task Force 28, which is a 28th ID out of Pennsylvania, who has a HERF, a Homeland Response Force, and there will be about 600 folks there, and their primary duty is to augment the forces in the nation's capital if needed. If something should go south on us, we have capability that we can move towards Washington to help us out, if you will. So we have a very robust plan. All of the tags, the adjutants general of the different states and territories are all read in, and they are prepared to support us if needed.
Great, thank you. Let's go to this side over here, the gentleman.
Thank you. Tom Sherwood from NBC4 here in Washington. In addition to the hundreds of thousands of people expected to come to celebrate the transfer of power, there are also going to be an X number of protesters. To what extent are the military, I know the National Guard more likely is involved, but what do the military officers do in case of civil unrest or protests getting out of hand? Who's in charge of all of that?
The National Guard is in support of local authorities. One of the things that we will do with all National Guard members is to deputize them within the District of Columbia, which means that the Metropolitan Police Department will swear them in. We will support law enforcement activities. If something goes bad, it's up to the law enforcement agency to make the first move, if you will, and only if needed would they call on the National Guard to support them. But we are here to support all law enforcement initiatives within the District of Columbia.
Follow up, sir?
Yes, thank you. So there's no need for anyone to activate the Guard. It will, in fact, be activated when they are deputized?
Once you're deputized, the Guard has the full authority to support law enforcement. So it's not a question of activating. They're already active. They're already on the streets. They will be housed within the area that they are supporting. So they are supporting the Secret Service, the Park Police, MPD, all of the law enforcement agencies that have asked for our support.
Great, thank you. We had a question over here, sir.
Thank you. I'm Hideki Yui with NHK Japan Broadcasting Corporation. My question is General Becker. Well, I'm wondering what is the biggest challenge and also what is the biggest threat which might disrupt the ceremony?
It's a great question. You know, as the Joint Task Force National Capital Region, one of our biggest challenges is making sure that all of the members that make up this Joint Task Force get properly credentialed to get into all the areas that they have to get to support it. And that may seem like a very administrative, mundane type of task, but it's no small feat. You know, from the greatest threat, we work very closely in support of the U.S. Secret Service, the Capitol Police, the Park Police. So that is their purview is focused on the threat. We stay very closely tied in with them and the FBI to understand the threat. You know, clearly, at this point, the biggest concern are the number of potential protesters. I don't know that any have been permitted yet, but the number of potential protesters and how that impacts the inauguration and especially the parade itself. And, you know, from our concern, one of the other big concerns is weather that day, because we will have service members that will be out there from 3 in the morning until late that night supporting, and they'll be outdoors. So, you know, a couple things we can't control, like the weather, but that's one of our big concerns. Thanks.
Ma'am, over here on the far left.
Marty Van Dyne with Newsnet News. I have two questions. One of them, and I know you said you're still negotiating or dealing with the pick on this, but do we have any indication whether President Trump will get out of his car and walk the parade route?
I'll take that. The answer at this point is no, and I've sat in some of the executive steering committee meetings preparing for this, and clearly the Secret Service has talked about it. Previous presidents have done it, but at this point we just don't know what the president-elect plans to do during the parade.
Okay, my other question goes back to the security issue and protesters. Are there going to be roped off areas for the protesters as there has been previously?
I would pass that to General Walker, who is the task force commander on the streets.
So we have task force security, task force crowd, task force access. There will be roped off areas. So we've had that in the past. Every inauguration that I've been a part of, there have been areas designated, roped off, secured, so Americans can practice their First Amendment rights.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Question up here in front, sir.
Thank you very much. Mario Diaz with WPIX TV in New York City. She just touched on that subject, but on a separate note, how challenging is it for the four of you to, at the same time you expressed how this is an honor to be a part of this day and how much significance, but to convey that message to the personnel that will be serving that day to stay focused even though it's a time of history? Yeah.
I'll start, and then obviously I need to pass it over to our National Guard brothers. You know, so when we started this planning in detail close to 8 months ago, even before the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies did their first nail ceremony, we showed a video where President George Washington took the first oath in 1789 at Federal Hall in New York City. And we showed that to all of our inauguration teammates that make up this joint task force. And the purpose for that was to remind them that this isn't just about 2017 and the 58th presidential inauguration. This is about a long history of the military support to presidential inaugurations. And so we're not only representing here in 2017 when we actually conduct the ceremony all of the millions of service members from all services, all components that wear this uniform, but we also represent all those who came before us and what they did to support presidential inaugurations from 1789 up to present. So I think we just try to instill in them the historical significance of this peaceful transfer of power in our democracy and what it represents not just to our country, but really to the entire world.
The challenges I would have in the National Guard, as you heard, there will be about 40 states and territories coming in to support us. I've spoken to the chief of Metropolitan Police Department, the chief of the Capitol, the chief of the Park Police, and remembering that we are in support of them, we will have to understand their rules of engagement so that we can brief the service members coming in from different states to make sure we represent them appropriately. General Becker just spoke about representing the military, representing the uniform that you're wearing. If you look at the uniform, General Becker is active, I'm Guard. We look alike. So the uniforms are alike. So it's difficult for the public to know, is it a Guardsman or is it active duty? So we have to represent the uniforms that we have on, Army and Air in the case of the Guard. And we have a reception station where we receive all troops coming into the district. And there are legal briefings, code of conduct briefings. There are a series of briefings that we go through before they're deputized and launched to their respective work areas.
Great, thank you very much. Sir, in the front here.
Jim Dressback, I'm with the Pentagram newspaper, Joint Base Meyer, Henderson Hall. General Becker, you made an interesting point about the weather. Can you run us through the resources you will be using and the timeline when you will start checking? I mean, a lot of people have 10-day forecast. Will you be doing 20? Just run us through what you're expecting to do with the weather.
Well, so far, I put the chaplain on this task, and he has guaranteed us a beautiful 40-degree, clear, very nice day. Now, seriously, that's a great question. So, ultimately, the Presidential Inauguration Committee will have, they will make the determination about whether there will be an outdoor parade based on the weather forecast, and of course, we'll support whatever their decision is. As far as the weather call for our service members, if the call from the Presidential Inauguration Committee is to do an outdoor ceremony and parade, at 4:30 in the morning, based on the weather for that day, we've got multiple uniforms, and every one of our service members that will be outdoors participating in this have 3 different uniforms that they will carry with them. And at 4:30, I'll make that call, and they'll go to the appropriate uniform, and so that we are all in the same uniform and the appropriate uniform based on that temperature. So it's 4:30 in the morning on the day of the event, on the 20th of January, is when I'll make that final call for those folks who are going to be outside.
For the Guard, we have several units that are coming in from different parts of the country. Virgin Islands, Florida, Guam, they would all be here. My concern is making sure that they can find their cold weather gear before getting here. But this is my 10th inauguration, and we can look back a little bit at 2009, for example. That was a very cold day. And we make sure that all of our service members have all of the equipment that they need to get through whatever weather may come at us. So we are in constant contact with the states that are supporting us, letting them know what gear to bring.
Great, thank you. Question over here, ma'am. If you, for the microphone, just one moment. Thank you.
Perry Stein with the Washington Post. You mentioned that there'll be 13,000 armed services in the city on Inauguration Day. One, I want to make sure that number is correct, and 2, how many of them will be armed?
That number is, I've got 5,000 supporting on the active duty side ceremonially, the National Guard approximately 8,000, so that number is correct, and none of the active duty Title 10 service members will be armed.
And none of the guardsmen will be armed.
Great. Thank you. Sir, follow-up or new question?
Thank you very much. Tom Sherwood again from NBC4 here in Washington. What is the advice the various officers or enlisted people will be given in terms of terrorism and terrorism attacks? How do they respond knowing that the police, again, take first control? This is a Secret Service national special security event. What's the advice to the officers who are coming in from out of town to be alert and aware, obviously?
Of course, during our in-processing, before we deputize them, they would be getting a security briefing, an intel briefing on what to expect. As I mentioned earlier, we have spoken to the chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, the chief of the Park Police, the chief of the Capitol, and we are following their lead. We are there in support of them. So if there's a threat or an outburst, they would be the first to respond, but we would be right there with them in case they need our support.
Thank you.
As far as ceremonial participants go, they're all going to be handed basically a quick reaction card of steps to follow and those types of things. But anytime there's an event like this, there's a very well thought out retrograde plan, if you will, where we'll take accountability, we'll get on buses, the same buses that we'll use to get in and out of the city. And again, the military is not the first responders, so we'll regroup and then take accountability and establish command and control and go from there.
Great, thank you, sir. Ma'am, up here in front.
I heard crowd estimates on the other side of approximately 800,000. I'm wondering if that's a generic estimate that was devised before the inauguration, or if you're revising crowd estimate based on, buses being chartered and hotel rooms being booked and, social media. I mean, how good is that number, and, how might it, fluctuate in the coming weeks?
We are prepared to support whatever crowds come at us. Our framework that we've established, which was established in 2008 during President Obama's first inauguration, where we had crowds upwards of 1 million folks within the nation's capital. the framework that we have established has the flexibility to deal with crowds. Yes, we are in the receive mode as to what that number would be, but it would not affect our planning processes.
But so is 800,000 the working crowd estimate? And I mean, yeah, assuming you want a more refined estimate as time goes on.
Yes,
Who does that?
we have heard the number of 800,000 also, but our planning processes and the number of support personnel we are providing to the agencies will not change. But an additional strategy we have put in place, and I mentioned one of those a little earlier about the HERF out of Pennsylvania, but we have contingency forces built into our strategy that we can get a more robust force in any one of the sub-task forces that General Walker mentioned earlier. Task Force Crowd Management, Task Force Security, Access. There are several sub-task forces. And the way we have designed the force is to have more military police, and which are Army forces, and security forces from the air. So my formation is made up of a heavy number of military police and security forces who understand police work.
Great, thank you very much.
The mission analysis is ongoing. So the 800,000 is a good number to start with, but as General Schwartz mentioned, in 2009 it was over 1 million. The important thing to take away is that whatever the number is, the United States military and the National Guard can support our district and federal government partners. We have the ability to surge, we have the ability to lift and shift. As General Schwartz mentioned, we have 11 task forces, so we can augment those people. We have it broken down in our mission analysis because, as General Becker said, we can't control the weather. That we would have maybe an 8-hour shift or a 10-hour shift. So what happens? Something goes bad where we need to augment. That 8-hour shift becomes a 12-hour shift. The 12-hour shift becomes a 14-hour shift. We are fundamentally service members, so we're used to long hours. We're not talking about an extended operation. You could work 12, 14, 16 hours if you have to. We've all done it. We're ready.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, there are just a few more minutes remaining in our question and answer session. We have time for just 2 more questions. Yes, sir?
Thank you. Wyatt Goolsby with EWTN, the Global Catholic Network. This question can be taken by any of you. My question is about the significance of the Trump Hotel here in Washington, D.C. I noticed on the big map in there it's highlighted. Is there any other significance in terms of security? Is there going to be any, to your knowledge, any extra police or Secret Service? How does that sort of play into it, other than the fact that it's located right there along the route?
We are in support of law enforcement and their plans. If the Metropolitan Police Department decides that that's a primary target and they need to have additional security there, we will be in support of their plan. Would it be MPD officers, additional MPD officers? Probably so. Would there be guardsmen there? Maybe, maybe not. But whatever analysis that they have performed, we would be there. It could be traffic control, and understanding where that building is, it's right in the heart of the parade route and everything else. So it will be secured because of its location.
Great. In time for just one more question, sir.
Thank you. Corey Dickstein with Stars and Stripes. I want to ask how the Guard units were selected. Is there any significance to having such an expansive range of units from all over the country, I suppose?
I briefed, like I normally do, as I mentioned, this was my 10th. Actually, several in leadership positions. But the adjutants generals normally get together 2 or 3 times a year. And I briefed back in February about this upcoming inauguration. And the adjutants generals are the leaders of their states' guards, and they all volunteered to be here. It's D.C. National Guard's responsibility for the hosting, housing, and logistic support to those guardsmen. Some of these guardsmen from other states, this is probably their 3rd or 4th time coming to do an inauguration within the nation's capital. So they're overjoyed. Several states don't have a major event. DC has one probably every couple of months, an NSSE. So we are well exercised, and the young men and women, just like they volunteered to serve overseas, they have volunteered to come and do this event.
So
Wonderful.
If I may add, just to give a little granularity to that, so Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, can you hear me? Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, we will bring a lot of those guardsmen, Army and Air, because they bring the vehicles with them, and the vehicles will support task force crowd, task force access. So they'll be driving their vehicles. Puerto Rico, Guam, they'll be flying. So a lot of the selection on the bigger organizational units are coming from our neighboring states where they can drive to the location.
I would like to just highlight one thing on the active duty side. The bulk of the Joint Task Force National Capital Region is stationed here in the National Capital Region. We do have some folks coming from out of town, but as General Schwartz pointed out, every time there's a national special security event in the NCR, and there have been 4 just in the last 18 months since I've been here, we come together as a joint task force and we support the U.S. Secret Service, Capitol Police, Park Police, Metropolitan Police, and we work hand in hand with our D.C. National Guard partners. So we are this team that puts all this together for the 58th presidential inauguration, we are all very familiar. We have very strong relationships, and we work together all the time in support of national special security events. So this will not be the first time we've done something like this, maybe just a slightly larger scale.
And there's a seamless operation between what General Becker does and what I do, because we have one focus, is to make sure that this inauguration is done in a safe and secure manner.
Great. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Following the press briefing, the Joint Task Force National Capital Region and Joint Task Force District of Columbia staff will be available to help you with future needs. They're located here to my right, to your left. We will have some additional subject matter experts available for additional one-on-one interviews. If you do need to do any follow-up or clarification from your interviews earlier, please grab a member of one of our public affairs staff to assist you. It was my pleasure to have you with us today, and thank you again for attending, and enjoy the rest of your morning. Gentlemen.